The main character of our story, the Rover, is actually pretty strong, unlike some other gacha games. Havoc Rover deals a surprising amount of damage, while being a completely free character. And with the last 3 sequences coming soon, she might just become even stronger. Rover has 2 stances, her basic stance and her forte stance. Let's focus on her basic stance first. Rover has a standard 5-hit basic attack string. You won't be using this much, so don't worry about leveling these. Her resonance skill, Wing Blade, deals pretty big damage. She uses her wing to uppercut enemies for 286% attack, and then she smacks them down, dealing the same damage again. And for the final part of her basic stance, her Liberation, Deadening Abyss. This is a massive nuke, dealing 1520% attack to the enemies in front of her. When Rover has built up enough forte energy, which she can do by using her basic attacks, her resonance skill and her intro skill, you can use her charge attack to deal a bit of damage, whilst also changing her basic attacks and resonance skill. Her new basic attacks now deal a nice amount of damage in a 5-hit combo, with the really strong hits being 3, 4 and 5. This will overall be the most amount of damage compared to your resonance skill or liberation. As for her new resonance skill, Life Taker, she will use the Scythe, dealing 2 hits, both dealing 276% attack, followed up by 4 tiny slashes, which each deal 10% attack. Her gameplay is heavily focused on her forte stance, as you can see with her inherent skills. The first one increases her Havoc damage by 20%, which is pretty good compared to Alto's inherent skill, for example. As for the second one, she will generate more liberation energy whilst basing attacking in her forte stance, but since her liberation costs 125 energy, every little bit helps. As for my leveling advice, I would level her forte circuit first. This is where most of her damage comes from. After that, you can level your resonance liberation, because the damage scaling on this is insane. And finally, you can level your resonance skill. This is a bit of damage that you consistently use, but remember, this does not have priority over your forte or liberation.
You will obey.
Even her sequences pretty much all focus on her forte stance. Her first sequence increases her resonance skill damage bonus by 30%. This is pretty nice, since Rover uses her skill quite a lot. Her second sequence plays into her first one, because after Rover enters her forte stance, her resonance skill cooldown will be completely reset. This is a great sequence, because without it, Rover will miss out on quite a bit of damage in her forte stance. Sadly, sequence 3 is not that useful as the others. After hitting your 5th basic attack, you will regenerate 10% missing HP on hit. Now for the missing sequences, these are quite powerful, and I'm guessing we will unlock them in the next patch together with Camellia. Her sequence 4 will decrease the enemy's Havoc resistance by 20% for 20 seconds after hitting either her transforming heavy attack on the enemies or her liberation. This sounds like a great sequence for dual Havoc teams, like the one she has now with Dungeon, and maybe a soon-to-be team with Camellia. Sequence 5 gives her last basic attack in the forte stance a bit more damage. 50% of basic attack 5's damage to be exact. The sequence is not that great compared to her other sequences, but every little bit of damage helps. And finally, sequence 6. In her forte form, she will gain 25% crit rate. I personally think this is a great sequence, although it's not something flashy, it will increase your damage output by quite a bit. As for her weapons, this will be quite a long segment since she has a lot of great options. First, let's get the standard 5-star weapon out of the way, the Emerald of Genesis. With 587 base attack and 24% crit rate, this is already a great option. And if you include the passive that grants 12.8% energy regen and up to 12% attack, this weapon will be one of the strongest weapons on Rover. We will baseline this weapon at 100%. The second weapon, that is actually stronger than the Emerald of Genesis, is the Blazing Brilliance, Chun-Li's signature weapon, with 587 base attack and 48% crit damage. Its passive gives 12% attack for free, whilst the second part of the passive gives an up to 56% resonance skill damage buff. This weapon will be even better for Rover in the future, because when you use the Emerald of Genesis whilst also having sequence 6, you will have a high chance to overcap her crit rate. We will give the Blazing Brilliance a 104% power rating. If you have the Battle Pass, however, the Looming Gloss can be a great option. With 387 base attack and 36% attack, this weapon will be the lowest base attack weapon on the list. Luckily, its passive is really good. When you use your Resonance skill, it will increase your basic and heavy attack damage by 64%. This is a great buff for a 4-star weapon. The Looming Gloves at R5 will get a 96% power rating. And finally, for the free-to-play weapons, we have the Commando of Conviction and the Lunar Cutter. They both have the same base stats, those being 412 base attack and 30.3% attack. Sadly, no crit, but that's the life of a free-to-play weapon. Commando of Conviction will increase your attack by 30% after using an intro skill. This is actually a pretty good buff, seeing how there's almost no prerequisites. As for the Lunar Cutter, however, it has a pretty big description. You gain 6 stacks upon entering the battlefield. Each stack will increase your attack by 4% with a maximum of 6 stacks. Every 2 seconds you lose 1 stack, but once you defeat an enemy, you will gain 6 stacks. With this weapon, you will juggle your attack up and down, and whilst getting 24% attack is nice, you will lose it fairly quickly. The Commando of Conviction at R5 will gain a power rating of 97%, and the Lunar Cutter at R5 will get a rating of 90%. Here's the complete list. Surprisingly, the Looming Gloss is not the best 4-star option in this list, which is pretty weird considering you need to spend a bit of money to be able to obtain it, let alone R5 it. Havoc Rover can use 2 different sets, even though I would only recommend the second set if you have a really good set for it already. The first set is going to be the Sun Sinking Eclipse. This set offers a total of 40% Havoc damage bonus. Luckily, the set's conditions for gaining the damage bonus is fairly easy to obtain. You need to hit a total of 4 basic attacks or heavy attacks on the enemy, each giving 7.5% Havoc damage bonus. As for your active echo, you should choose the Dreamless. Besides giving a good amount of damage for free, if Rover uses this echo after unleashing her liberation, the echo's damage will be increased by 50%. The second set I can recommend is the Lingering Tune set. It gives a total of 30% attack and increases your auto skill damage by 60%. And even though Rover's auto skill deals a pretty decent amount of damage, it is not worth it to try and get a good set of the Lingering Tunes. The active echo for this set is pretty bad as well. In total, it will increase your attack by 12%, which is better than nothing, but still pretty bad. Rover has some pretty decent teammates that can buff her damage. We can get the obvious out of the way. Farina and Shorekeeper. Farina is the best standard resonator in the game, so it is a no-brainer to put her on the team. If you want to know how to build her, you can check out this video I made about Farina. As for Shorekeeper, her healing and her buffs are really good, with her liberation giving crit rate and crit damage. In the end, she will be slightly better for Rover, and, obviously, we cannot forget the buff Shorekeeper gives to Rover specifically. Now for her sub DPSs. First up, we have Dungeon. Dungeon deals a pretty good amount of damage whilst also having pretty fast Concerto build up. And, of course, we can't forget her auto skill, which increases the incoming Resonator's Havoc damage by 23%. And, if you manage to get her Sequence 6, she will increase the entire team's attack by 20%. And for the second pick, we obviously have Sanwa. Sanwa is a staple unit in so many teams, even when they can't benefit from her auto skill. And that is just because of her crazy fast fuel time. Luckily, our Rover can benefit from the 48% basic attack damage bonus, and just like Dungeon, if you have Sequence 6, she can increase the attack of the entire team by 20%. Overall, Dungeon's damage boost is a bit better than Sanwa's boost, with the only drawback being the Dungeon sacrifices HP, so you gotta make sure that you don't die. But if you can manage that, I recommend that you use Dungeon as a teammate.
None shall whisper.
I personally think that the Rover exceeded everyone's expectations, not only because of her damage, but also because of the animations they gave her. With new versions of the Rover coming, I will make guides according to those releases, so make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss those uploads. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, might I recommend the video on the screen right now. I appreciate you all. Until next time, bye bye.